am so excited. I was telling Leela, I haven't been this excited for any webinar, I think, before. And just on a personal note, Leela is actually my best friend from primary school. She is the person who helped me get through those first few years with a lot of fun. And she reminded me actually that we even made up our own language in primary school, which I remember we forced our group of friends to learn. So Leela continued in her creativity. I would have loved to have done more of what she's done. So let's share a little bit about her. So she trained at the Oxford School of Drama and received her master's degree in drama from WITS. And she currently lectures Drama for Life. So she is the first person that I think when I Googled her after having lost touch for a couple of years, I actually saw the almost job title storyteller. And I thought, that's amazing that you can actually be called that as your job. So I was so excited to get in touch with her again, but she's not just a storyteller. She's an author, she's an actor, she's a director, and she really has mastered the art and science of storytelling in the performing arts world and in the corporate world. And I think what she does is she's got the ability to bring people from diverse cultures together and create these unique connections and unforgettable experiences, which I think is so powerful through theatre and through storytelling. She has got many awards, far too many to list here. So I pulled out the two that I recognize the most, being the Golden Ovation Award and the Naledi Award. And she has co-written a book, but she said, no, please, let's not talk about her book. But it was called The World in an Orange, exploring the work of Barney Simon, who I also just loved growing up, loved his work. And she's really influenced paradigm shifts through her work across local audiences, across international audiences. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I'm so excited for us to talk to her today, because my personal passion is also interviewing people. So I work with hiring managers to train them on how to interview and hire and select the right people for their organizations while creating a very positive candidate experience, so important. And I also work with people who are in career transition, helping them in going through that stressful interview process themselves. So how do I know what somebody is asking me, why they're asking me this, how do I answer it? And what I love is that storytelling is such a powerful tool in the world of interviewers. And I think it can be such a game changer, whether you are someone who is interviewing others or whether you are someone who is being interviewed. So what I'd love us to do is be able to chat to Leela and find out more about what storytelling actually is, what makes a good story, why is it so powerful, what's her experience with that, and then see how we can relate that to the world of interviews. So Leela, over to you. And Leela still looks the same, if I can just say, she hasn't changed at all.
Okay.
But Leela, as I said, you are recognized under many titles. So director, actor, author, storyteller. Please start off by telling us what drew you into the world of storytelling.
Well, I suppose storytelling was really the only thing that I could do. I sort of started off as I went into drama school and I became an actress. And then it was just sort of an organic process because theatre is storytelling. That I then became a director and now work at the University of the Witwatersrand in Drama for Life, where one of our methodologies is using storytelling for research. So it's just, and I suppose being aware of, as an actress night after night, watching these different audience members come in from completely different backgrounds, completely different worlds, and leaving as a collective. I sort of marvel at that really, and then I've always then taken that experience into whatever I've done. I'm aware of the power of storytelling.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about Drama for Life and how you use storytelling there.
So Drama for Life is a postgraduate department, and so there's various different students with different research interests, and one of the methodologies is storytelling. So you can research, it's practice as research. So you use performance and storytelling as a way to find your way into really anything. You know, anything that you are investing in. It can be town planning, it can be arts-based policy, it can be anything really. Because you come at from either from an auto-ethnographic, from your own story point of view, or you come at from a kind of collective story, or you're basically using story as research to uncover whatever it is that your interests are. It's a whole new way of researching.
Yeah, I think I see it becoming more and more popular in every industry. I think it's no longer there's no longer kind of bracketed to just the theatre and, you know, entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, it's all around us, story. I mean, it always has been since the beginning of time. We've been sitting around fires telling stories. Our survival is often to do with stories. We give lessons through stories. So our brains are kind of hardwired to story. But we see it everywhere now, in advertising, in politics, in teaching, in therapy. And I mean, we're very aware of story at the moment. And there's a whole lot of research that's been done around the efficacy of story and why it works. I know, Jane, you posted that beautiful study from the Princeton Neuroscience Institute, where they measured the blood flow in the teller of a story and the blood flow in the brain of the receiver of the story. And the most extraordinary thing is that they match. So the brain lights up in the teller of the story, if the story is well told, and in the receiver of a story. So what that is you're sparking the mirror neurons in the person that you're speaking to. And so if you really want to touch someone or sink into their brain, it's, use story. It's a no-brainer.
No, I love that. And I think what excites me about that particularly is there's so much more awareness, not just about, COVID and the pandemic, but also around Black Lives Matter and bias and people overcoming bias and really embracing and promoting diversity, inclusion, equity. And so again, in an interview scenario, there's so much bias that people have, unconscious bias as they walk in. And I love the idea that storytelling is something that can really break that down and help people to connect, to enable them to have a fair chance to move forward, or to really connect for the real reasons, for the importance of the job and the good of the organization. And so people don't just end up working together with someone they already feel connected to because they're so similar. But storytelling can really help people who are so diverse to connect and find common ground.
I mean, that's exactly what storytelling does. It kind of breaks down the divide between us and them. It exposes our shared humanity. That's really what it does. And then we realize we're really all the same. And I mean, a world that's kind of so driven with perfectionism, storytelling is the medicine in a way, because it allows us to be human. And we're all craving to be human. We want to witness the human in the other person. And storytelling allows us to do that. If you just take a group of very different people and you run a storytelling session, by the end, you know each other and you know yourselves because you're visible within each other. It's,
I love that, because ideally also in an interview, that's what you want to walk away with. I think when I do the training workshops, one of the most common questions I get from hiring managers is, how do I see the real person that I'm interviewing? Because so often people go in with a facade, and of course they're trying to impress. They want the job. They're trying to put their best foot forward. So I love the way that storytelling can really help people to be real in an interview. But I think that takes vulnerability.
It does. It takes a bit of risk. You have to risk yourself when you tell a story. You have to just kind of take the plunge and trust in it and believe in it, and expose your vulnerability. But then your vulnerability, of course, as we know, is your strength. I'm thinking of Brené Brown and
Yes, love Brené Brown's work. Yes. Yeah, especially, so I think that in an interview, a candidate, for example, or an applicant is quite afraid to be vulnerable, because they're thinking, oh my goodness, if I'm vulnerable and if I show people the vulnerable side of me, are they going to want to hire me? So as you say, it really takes trust in the story itself and in the process to
So we need to check today's agenda.
go and kind of
We
be
lost that
yourself.
one.
I think that's
Sorry, is there somebody? Oh, sorry, something happened there. Someone popped up. If everyone can please mute, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Sorry, carry on, Leela.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, you don't want to come into a space and just be vulnerable all over the place. You have to choose your story carefully, that it carries your kind of value system. You must know what you're doing with your story. And then I'll talk through the pointers later that you kind of earn that moment of vulnerability. And it's not really vulnerability. It's more being real. It's more, it's using your lessons and sharing them. And lessons come from being vulnerable. So, but it's not about sort of coming into a space and just being vulnerable. You know, it's carefully crafted. So you are protected.
Yes. Okay. I like what you're saying, because I think that would be the concern of an applicant, and an important skill to learn, to be able to know, okay, when and how should I be vulnerable in a way that actually makes me, it actually enables me to sell myself better than if I wasn't.
Yeah, I think that's essential. So there's a whole set of skills with storytelling, and you need to practice as well. You can't just come in and then tell a story without, you need to really kind of master it, and then you can use it beautifully. But I think you do have to be very aware of what story you're telling. What is the story embodying about you? What is its strategy, I suppose? What is it going to show? And know that, and then own it.
Yeah, very important. And I think that talks to the importance of people doing research before they go into an interview, to not just go in not knowing anything about the organization or the role, but really understanding not just the requirements, but also the values of the organization and the culture.
Well, the organization also has its own story. It's got its corporate narrative. So it's important to align your story, or find your story aligning with the corporate narrative. I'm just thinking now of it's Yale University that's running a leadership course at the moment around story. And what they do is they explore the personal story, and then they explore the collective story, and then they explore what's happening in the now. And they combine the three. And if you look at like someone, a really great speech makers like Obama, for instance, he always covers those three. So he starts off, he tells his personal story. Then he tells the collective story of the people that are with him. And then he ties it into what's happening in the now, which gives it a bit of urgency, which makes everyone then unite around the importance of the now. So but that's far more advanced. At the moment, I suppose this kind of session would be more about exploring the personal story, how you can use your personal story.
Yeah, so I think as an applicant, it would definitely be the personal story. And as you say, aligning that to the corporate story. So it kind of, kind of creates a connection and speaks the language of the person interviewing you. But on the other hand, we also know that interviewers, if they're interviewing somebody with a scarce skill, there is that war for talent, where everyone wants to hire the best people. And there are only so many of them sometimes in certain industries. So there's also a piece around the interviewer being able to tell a story that is going to attract people to want to work for that organization. So, yeah, maybe you can share a little bit with us. You're in a situation where you're almost the one higher up in the hierarchy, if you like, as a lecturer. And now you have these people coming in who almost, just by virtue of the situation, have less power, if you like. So how do you build that connection with people?
The way to get a group to tell a story, or a person to tell a story, is to tell a story yourself, because a story is a circle. A story is circular. It's a sharing. And even if it's a tiny story, it's to make sure that you're human. It's just a small story, my daughter left her homework on the table and we had to turn around and come back and get it. And you tell that story and what you kind of got by the end of that experience. It's just to make you human and to bring your own humanity into the space, which encourages them in return to do the same. I suppose in a lecturer situation, and we're using storytelling as a methodology, we're very consciously going through a whole program that kind of supports storytelling. But I think in an interviewer situation, it's so interesting you say that about having to attract, the top talent. If you're wanting to get a story out of someone, you have to, the best thing you can do is to tell a story first. And then that gives permission. And then it's an authentic, genuine kind of exchange.
No, I agree with you. And I think there has become more and more emphasis around that, where an interviewer is an authentic exchange more than a top-down, I'm the interviewer, you're the person, I'm just going to sit back and select who's the best person.
Yes.
And what I've seen is often applicants going into an organization, and maybe they're in a position where, I've heard of 3 or 4 situations where at the end of the interview, the applicant said, "Well, thanks so much for the interview. I'll get back to you and let you know, if I'm interested or not."
Wonderful.
Nice to be in that situation. But I think in those situations, especially, applicants, and also we see it a lot in our Gen Zs, are going into an interview and saying, I want to know the story of the interviewer. I want to understand what their story is in the organization, because that's going to help me decide whether I want to work here or not. So they may even ask that question. Yeah, so they want to be inspired. They think, okay, if you've had a good journey, then the likelihood is maybe I can also have a good journey. And I've seen hiring managers say that as well, that they purposefully tell their story of how they've grown through the organization, because they find that it not only inspires applicants, but it also inspires good word of mouth for them. Because branding is also shifting into the hands of the interviewer now, where somebody's experience is what helps create the perception of their brand. So they need to make it positive.
Yeah, so I suppose that, again, that's about corporate narratives and being aware of what corporate narrative you're telling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So Lila, you've alluded a couple of times to, what makes a good story. So if someone is telling a story, they need to be able to have some skill in this and not just, arrive and just tell a story. Yeah. So please tell us a little bit more around what storytelling really is and what makes a good story.
Okay, so I'll take you through 5 pointers. But the internet and literature is full of these. They're all there. It's no secret. The trick is to practice them. So you've got to put these things in practice. So I've made an acronym of STORY, STORY. Yeah. And I'll take you through them. But I suppose the challenge is to take on the pointers and see what you can do with it. So I'll start with S. So S is structure. And I would say that one of the most important things of storytelling, and everybody else, not just me, says that structure is, just be aware of structure. So Aristotle said you need 3 things for communication, for authentic communication to take place. The one is ethos, which is authenticity. You've got to tell your own story, tell it from your heart, don't make something up. The next one is logos, which is logic, there's a logical progression that the receiver of the story feels like the story is going somewhere. It isn't just, you're not just stuck with your uncle at a Christmas party and he's not stopping talking for the last 20 minutes and you think you're going to die on the spot, and the last is pathos, which is heart. So bring your heart into the story. But actually, you can only really earn pathos once you've conquered the structure. And that sounds hard, but it really isn't. And we all inherently understand it, because what that basically is a beginning, a middle, and an end. You don't have to do it in that order. You can start at the end and go to the middle and, then go to the beginning. But to be aware of what the beginning, the middle, and the end is holding. And that's a really useful tool to apply really to any story, even if you are telling it on the hoof. So the beginning is where you were when the story began. What is the status quo? What is the world like when you began? The middle is the instigating moment. It's the challenge. It's the spark, but what happened? And then the end is the new bliss, or the new realization, the new understanding. And that structure is basically what you can follow really with anything. And then various different people play around with it. I don't know whether you've posted the Nancy Duarte talk
No, but I did ask Kelly to share it in our chat box. So Kelly, please do that.
Well, she's great to watch. She's a top TED Talk coach. You know, every TED Talk starts with a story. And she's analyzed structures of stories. And and this is more like sort of in presentational stories and sort of talks. And she's analyzed going from, so she starts with what is, and then what could be, what is, what could be, what is, what could be. And then it finally arrives at the new bliss. But basically, it's just a beginning, a middle, and end, and to be aware of the beginning, middle, and end, and apply that to everything. And I'm not talking big, lofty stories. I'm talking like maximum 2 minutes, not, you know, even a minute. You can cover the beginning, middle, and end very easily. And who was it that wrote the shortest story in the world? I think it was Hemingway, which is like a sentence. I don't know if you remember sentence.
Yes, it's something about the baby shoes.
Yes, that's right. Something like baby shoes never worn for sale, or something like that.
Yes.
And in that, you'll find the beginning, the middle, and the end, even though it's only a sentence. So it's a very useful skill. So structure. I would definitely start with structure. Then T for the story is telling the tiny details. So this is, don't leave the details out. Don't sit back on the details. Bring the details, and they don't have to be big details. There's kind of 4 that stand out. The one is time. So if you've got a time going on in your story, as soon as you say it was at 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, or I was racing to work, it was 6 o'clock on a Monday morning, and there was a traffic jam, immediately your mirror neurons in the teller are sparking, because we all know what that's like. But if you leave the time out, you're leaving that experience. And it's such an easy thing to do. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. Immediately your audience is with you. So time. The other one is on names. You know, use the names, even if they don't know the names. You know, Sally, you know, my husband Craig said. Suddenly we've got a picture of something rather than just my husband said. Place, find, you know, use sense of place. I was sitting in the garden, you know, the sun was shining, the birds were singing, and then suddenly is so different from I'm sitting in my car and it's hot and the air conditioning isn't working. Immediately there's 2 different things happening. So place is really really important. Amount is another one. Numbers. If you've got numbers, say the numbers. You know, again, I was driving along the highway at 200 kilometers an hour, or I was driving along the highway at 60 kilometers an hour. Suddenly the whole world is different. Those are 2 different people. And just by saying that, you have an understanding without saying much more. And then the last one, is that 4? I think, is dialogue. Is don't use reported dialogue. Don't say, I said to I asked my supervisor, you know, what should I do? Rather say, I said to my supervisor, what am I going to do? You know, immediately, if you put it into active, proper, you know, language, you're there. The mirror neurons are firing up. You have an understanding of that world without doing much. So tell the tiny details. Don't feel embarrassed to tell the tiny details. You know, use them naturally. You know, use them. So that's a very important one. So are you with me?
I love that one, especially for an interview, because it just made so much sense. The other day I was coaching somebody who was going for an interview, and she's a business analyst. So everything around her thinking is very process oriented. So I asked her a question to help her practice how to answer the question. And she shared a series of events, but there wasn't any person in it, and there wasn't any dialogue. So when we practice it again, as you say, pulling in the details, and she didn't just say, so this is what happened and this is what I did. She said, well, so I said to her, but why did you do it? And she said, well, because I really believe that people need to know our company's values and live by them. But she'd left that out of the story. So that's that kind of, did you say that's the pathos?
Yes, the heart.
So when she retold the story, and instead of just giving the series of events, but she said, and so at one point we were in a meeting sitting around the table, and so said this, and I responded with these words, because I felt we've got to be able to live by these companies' values. It suddenly, as you said, it made me as the listener, even though we were in role play, it ignited my mind. I felt like, yes, now I can see it happening. Now your story comes alive. So I love what you're saying about bringing the detail.
That's a beautiful example, Jane. It's like suddenly it's just from going to black and white into color. You're suddenly present. Yeah,
yes.
Lovely.
Love it.
Okay,
yeah,
so so we've got the structure, we've got the tiny details. The O is what I spoke about earlier, that a story is a circle. A story is an exchange between you and the listener. And everything, all of these pointers are to ignite those mirror neurons. So an O is like an over to you question. It's giving the problem to the listener. And you can do that with a question. So you could say something like, gosh, there was such a thunderstorm. I don't know when last you were in a thunderstorm, when a crack of lightning just, and immediately your brain will go to the last time you had a thunderstorm. And top speakers do this all the time. And I'm thinking of that lovely example with Bill Gates, who's apparently very shy. And he was doing a talk on malaria. And he came in, it's a famous example, he came in and he could have done all the stats, he could have started with all the stats and, how they were going to solve the problem. And instead he came in with a jar full of mosquitoes. And he opened the jar and he let the mosquitoes go. And then he began the talk about malaria. So immediately, that's a very theatrical example, but immediately what you've done is you've given the problem over, you've handed it over. And a question, if you can place a question, or just, when was the last time you were in a hotel lobby, and it's got those gray seats, and immediately you're there, and it's such an easy thing to do. So question, so hand it over. Always be aware of that the story is a circle. So you are igniting the mirror neurons in the person that you're telling. And one way to do that is that way. And then we've got R for relatable. So this comes in with practice. So, and this is to do with your body and your voice and eye contact and how are you telling your story and being aware of how you're telling your story. So for instance, pause. The moment, pause is such a wonderful, powerful thing. If you pause before the moment that you want to speak, before that climactic point, if you just pause, it's almost like a close-up. It's like you're with me, and it's just to do with time, with a pause. It's easy. The other thing is tempo. Don't go too fast, which is probably exactly what I've been doing. So I'm racing against the clock. But just be aware. I tend to speak very fast. That you don't just take control of it. Hold it. Pitch. Don't just speak on one tone all the time, hammering along. Just sometimes drop it. Then you can go up, then think, and that's to do with, and that's, that's a whole thing in itself. It's to do with warming up your articulation, your resonance, hum before you go, stamp your feet, get your energy center up. It's that kind of stuff. Do some breathing exercises. Just be aware of how you are, that lovely Shakespeare speech of sawing the air with your hand. I think it's from Hamlet. It's that basically. Be aware of what your body is doing as you tell the story. So that's be relatable. And then the last one, which is I think the most important one really, apart from structure, but this is very important, is why. Why are you telling the story? Don't just launch into a story. And actually, you can tell any story if you know the why. So say, even if you're speaking to, say, a bunch of, engineers, and you're speaking, your story is about ballet, you can still tell that story, but be aware that you're speaking to a bunch of engineers so that you might talk about the line or the angle or the discipline or the rigor or the symmetry or be aware of who you're speaking to, the why. Why am I telling this story? And make sure that it covers it. And within that, I just want to say again, keep the story short. Don't feel that you have to launch. It's not a performance. It's a simple thing. Nancy Duarte says, start with any story, doesn't matter. Immediately you've broken down that barrier. It's not like it has to be this incredible performance. but just be aware of those few things. I don't want them to put you off those things and think suddenly now you've got to train. You don't. Just practice them and be aware of those things. And then that's it, that's story.
Oh, I love that, Leela. And I'm so grateful you mentioned the time element, because again, so many applicants ask, how long must my answer be in an interview? Because you don't want it to be too short that the person thinks, okay, is there any substance there? And you also, as you say, you don't want to be going on so that they feel like they're caught at Christmas lunch with their uncle who doesn't stop talking. So why 2 minutes? Is there something around 2 minutes, or is it just, is it a guideline or?
No, I would just be cautious to go above 2 minutes. I mean, like, I don't know, because I'm not, you would know this more, Jane, about how long an interview has to be. But in terms of, I'm thinking of the sort of story workshops I've done in corporations, we talk about don't go above 2 minutes. So you're telling your corporate narrative and you're trying to align it to your personal narrative and you're selling something. At the same time, try and do them all within 2 minutes, because otherwise it's overwhelming, and then it becomes a performance, and you don't want it to be a performance. That's not the area you're in. You're in a dialogue, essentially. So
and
no,
I like what you say about so because with the dialogue, I think what I do encourage people to do when they're not sure is at the end of their answer, they can say to the interviewer, is that enough detail? Do you want me to expand on anything? Because then they can feel comfortable that they've shared what the interviewer wants. And I think it also displays good listening skills and an appreciation for, I want to be able to tell my story in a way that makes the content valuable to you. I don't want to just, as you say, perform. Because as soon as someone performs in an interview, they can easily come across arrogant. And then the interviewer is put off and, thinks, oh, no, do we really want that person walking around here all day?
Yes. No, that's a very good point. But I would say, I suppose, just from my own teacher point of view, but your point of view is totally different. But I would say, don't let that fear of being arrogant stop you from because that's a big fear. That you think, oh, I can't, I think, and then you don't reveal yourself because you're scared of being arrogant. But I don't know, maybe it's very different in an interview.
No, I hear you. I get a lot of people saying, I'm afraid to sell myself because I'm afraid of coming across as arrogant. But as you were saying, I think what we then talk about is how you tell your story. You don't have to tell it in such a way that you're the hero, of course, because you need to demonstrate a certain skill, but you don't have to position it as if, this is all because of me.
And normally a story has an arc. So if you do follow the structure of beginning, a middle, and end, your beginning is very different to your end, and the lesson is in the middle. So perhaps you would have started off as one type of person, and you're revealing that. But then this thing happened, which then made you aware of something else and find strength that you didn't realize you had, and now you're completely different. So you've shown humility. It doesn't,
exactly. Exactly. And a lot of interviewers do want to hear that. They want to hear, what did you learn through the experience? Especially now where we have the jargon going around of everyone's got to be agile and they've got to be pivoting and they've got to be, flexible. So if you're sharing about how you changed in a situation or what you learned, then that demonstrates that ability as well. So, and I like what you're saying about also don't forget to share about the struggle. So I think the acronym we normally use in an interview is use the STAR, situation, task, action, result, or CAR, context, action, result, or CBR, context, behavior, result, to be able to structure your story, because often people just want to talk about the result. Now, this is what I did. But it's so shallow if you don't, as you say, draw them in with setting the scene and then really getting that pathos in and what you did, which shows your skill as well in that middle part. So yeah.
Nancy Duarte really sums it up so beautifully in that TED talk when she talks about moving between what is, what could be, what is, what could be. You know, I was stuck at home. I didn't know what to do. I kept thinking, but I know I've got this in me, but I thought I had no money. I don't know how to go forward. But I knew that there was this chance if I just followed that. But then and so it goes back and forth, and finally you get to the breakthrough, and you've really earned that breakthrough. So everyone's feeling it with you.
Yeah. And I love what you've just done now, Leela. As you've told that story, you've put in dialogue, which immediately I felt took me with you on the story from here to there to here to there. You didn't just, I was stuck and I didn't know what to do. Okay. So love that.
I'm an actor, so it's a bit different. That's my natural, true norm.
No, it's an amazing skill, and I can't, I can see Genevieve is clapping there. She also loved it.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much. I loved learning more about what you do. I loved, just connecting with you again and seeing your work and seeing how many lives you impact through your ability to tell stories. So I'm so grateful for your time. I know you came straight off another Shakespearean interview into this, so I know you're a busy person and really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It was an absolute joy and a lovely joy to meet you all as well.
Thank you. So please, if any of you haven't, please do join our OtterBox Thinking Talent Engagement Facebook group, because that's where we normally post the recordings of our videos and our webinars, as well as any future ones that come up. So you can stay in touch like that. But otherwise, thank you so much to everybody for your participation, for making the time to join us, for sharing your ideas, for sharing your questions. I know one question usually helps everybody. So once again, thank you. This is one of my joys of this year, and I'm so delighted to have been able to be part of this. So thank you. Thanks again, Leela.